Coogs House. Listen, I understand that Wednesday night's game for Houston is supposed to be an ugly, beat 'em up, drag 'em out, close Big 12 contest, but it's going to be a blowout.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. If you join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell them in the comments down below. If you like putting like the blueberries, chocolate chips, if you like putting that kind of stuff in your waffle or pancake, on top of your waffle or pancake. A lot to talk about today and getting ready for Houston and West Virginia basketball. And while I don't think it's going to be a flop, that's the pancake reference. I don't know. Anyway, I do think this game's going to be a fun one for the Houston Cougars. I think Houston blows them out. I've watched a couple West Virginia games now, trying to get ready for this. Admittedly, I was trying to steal some stuff from my own coaching career from them, but I think Houston's got the goods to flip this one on its head. I want to talk about how it could be an ugly game at the end. I don't want to get too dismissive, and I want to talk about matchups and stuff like that too. But I really do think Houston blows out West Virginia in this matchup if they just come with their A game. Now, there's a couple different reasons for that. If I look at like an analytical perspective before we get to the video, what West Virginia does really well is they shoot what I think a lot of people that they've played against would call a high field goal percentage. However, when you look at like relative to national scales, the effective field goal percentage that they shoot is like 180th across the college basketball. D1 basketball is about 340 teams. That's very middle of the road, middle of the pack. Houston has the legitimate best effective field goal percentage defense, meaning they force teams into the lowest field goal percentage effectively. Effective field goal percentage includes like you get a little bit more of a bump if you're making threes because they're worth more points and all that. What it means is Houston's making you make really tough shots and not like letting teams make very many shots. And as far as shot making goes, West Virginia is kind of about average. And that's probably even factoring the Kelvin Sampson this all, where he kind of always, and I call it Belichickian in a lot of ways because of what he did on the football field with New England Patriots, but he takes away what your team does best and kind of forces you to do something different, right? And with West Virginia, there's a couple of things you could pinpoint as that thing. I don't mean to say that it's easy to do, but I do think they're going to effectively take something away and make West Virginia play kind of with a hand tied behind their back. If I were intuitively guessing after watching them play, I would think that thing would be shooting a lot of threes. Threes make up 47.9% of their made field goals. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's a large percentage of their field goals, but it's very comparable to BYU. So you dig back into what Houston did to BYU. They held BYU to 55 points. BYU was 8 of 24 from the three-point line. Houston held BYU to 8 of 24 from the three-point line. But outside of Tevin Nell, who came off the bench, the rest of the BYU Cougars were just 4 of 18 from behind the arc against Houston. Houston forced a lot of tough shots. You're going to watch those clips. Those shots are all closed out. Those shots are all very rushed because the ball is frenetically having to move around before the defense can catch up to it because Houston's that much on top of it, right? Houston does a great job of forcing teams to take those rush shots if that's what they want to take away. If you're a bad three-point shooting team, they're going to let you shoot them because they're going to get the rebound and go the other way with it, right? Houston holds teams at 29.1% from three this season. Admittedly, some of that is, we're in mid-January and there's some non-conference games that had some not great shooting teams in there, but they also had a pretty tough non-conference slate in a couple different spots. I think what you look at that and see is one of the best teams in terms of defensive three-point percentage because they understand the schematic side. It's a very veteran team, right? All the returners we talk about all the time. And in doing that, I think what they're going to do here is they're going to force the handful of West Virginia shooters, if they're going to shoot from behind the arc, to shoot quick, contested three-point shots and force them to do something else to score. For what it's worth, I think that, there will be points scored, but it's not going to be a shutout or anything. You don't do that in basketball. But I also think that one of the reasons it's going to be a blowout is because something West Virginia does. And then we'll get into the X's and O's that is in this segment, still in this segment. Um, West Virginia has had multiple games this season, including wins, they build out a big lead and then watch it trickle away over the course of time, right? We'll talk more about that big lead part later in the show. But ultimately, when they give up those big leads, when the game shrinks, even in a win for West Virginia over Kansas, it's because they give up a lot of attack at the rim and a lot of offensive rebounds and putbacks on those attacking motions to the rim. Houston does both of those things really well. Houston attacks the rim really well because you have to space out to cover both LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp, two of the best 3-point shooters in college basketball, which opens up dramatically large, like really gaping drive lanes, right? Well, that means they're going to attack the rim, and they follow up with the offensive glass really, really well. I know that it's not maybe at the level that we've seen it in the past with Josh Carlton or Jarris Walker or whatever, but this team is one of the statistical best. They're 16th in offensive rebound percentage, meaning rebounding 38% of their misses is 16th in the country. They rebound at a fairly efficient clip too, and I would also point out that their starters are a lot better at that than the bench players are. Houston does a really great job of that, and if that's how teams come back on West Virginia, Houston's good at that from the jump of the game. I don't know that that big lead ever matters or happens. And I said that before I even get to the X and O's of this because West Virginia has a guard we're going to talk about in the matchups portion that is really talented. And a lot of their actions are in getting him involved in basic. I don't mean to make it simplistic, but it's a lot easier on a chalkboard than it is on person, obviously. High pick and roll, shooters in the corners. You help, kicks to a shooter. You don't, he attacks. You help from the big on the screen, flips it inside the guy, right? That's kind of been their MO the last few games. And Houston navigates that ball screen, that initial ball screen action with Milos, Suzanne, Manuel Sharp. Even LJ Cryer's gotten a lot better at it since it came from Baylor 18 months ago. They navigate that really well. I don't think that all those extra actions off of the ball screen are going to be all that open. They're going to get into their second, third, fourth actions. But when you look at them play other teams, they're not having to do that a whole heck of a lot. In fact, as far as like their pace of play goes, they're shooting it in the first 18 seconds of the shot clock. And while it's not like crazy fast relative to college basketball, it's really not as fast as like BYU or someone Houston saw earlier this year. Again, I don't mean to draw so many parallels BYU, but it seems to happen, I guess. It does feel like Houston's not giving up that first action in the first 18 seconds. You're going to have to wait to the 19, 20, 21st. Houston forces some of the longest possessions defensively in college basketball. I don't have the official stat on who leads the league in forced shot clock violations, but Houston does that multiple times a game. This is not going to be a game that West Virginia is going to feel comfortable in. Houston's going to win this game. Houston's got the streak of, I believe it's 7 games in a row coming in where holding teams under 60. I think that stands another game as well. They're playing in the Fertitta Center. The crowd's going to be electric because it's school's back in session. Students are on campus. This just doesn't feel like a game where, admittedly, I guess West Virginia just got bumped out of the top 25, but where a non-ranked team comes in and keeps close. It just doesn't. And I don't mean that to be too dismissive. I understand all possibilities are out there, and we'll talk about some of those later. I just feel like this game ends up being something more like 82 to 58, or maybe Houston's a bad shooting night and it's 72 to 58. I just don't think this one is all that close. Now, I want to talk about the matchups because I mentioned there is one guard to keep a really keen eye on because he can score in that pick and roll action. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. Now, holidays are over. Holiday hustle is past. But there's nothing like giving your house or your home a little TLC. Now, folks that have been following the show for a long time know we recently moved into a new house, and new house means new things to fill up, new spaces. You need new furniture. Wayfair is the best place to do it. But whether you're tidying up in a new place like myself, clearing out, or just want a new start, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. Now, the furniture selection is great. It's a huge selection, easy to find pieces that fit your style and budget. Again, teacher and coach, the budget part's important. My favorite part is the free and hassle free, both equally important, even for larger items. Delivery, right? Delivery free and hassle free is a big, big deal to me. And my toddler is not going to want me to go pick anything up. The delivery part's really important there. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. I know I did. Head to wayfair.com right now. This Wayfair, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Parker Ranger locked on Cougs. I'm like Houston, West Virginia, tipping off on Wednesday night. We mentioned this one's not going to be particularly close. I don't think this one's going to be all that close. I guess it's going to be proven wrong, but I do think the matchups here get interesting. Now, I use their starting lineup from the Colorado game with injuries, both present and past, and hot hands and whatever. They've had a bunch of different starting lineups there at West Virginia, but using their most recent game, Colorado over the weekend, and I guess I should stress, I think Sampson confirmed in his media availability this week, they flew straight from Colorado to Houston, have not been to West Virginia yet, so they kind of just came through on their way back. Their point guard is the guy. He's the head of the snake. He's the top of the totem pole. He is the guy to stop on this team. I think Houston will. I mentioned navigating the screen in the first segment, but Javon Small, he's a walking bucket. He last year he gave Houston 18 when he was the point guard at Oklahoma State. He gave Milos Uzan, who I imagine is the guy covering him, 17 and 21. Now, admittedly, Uzan was not the sole defender at Oklahoma covering him in either one of those games when he was at Oklahoma State, but I do think that is something to keep an eye on there. He's not a consistent passer, but does find the roll man pretty well, especially the guy that's been starting the last few games at the center position. We'll talk about later in the segment. But his biggest thing is he's over 19 points a game, almost 20 points per game, legitimate player of the year candidate in the conference if they make a real run at the conference in the latter half of the conference play here, right? Javon Small is a very, very talented scorer at all three levels. Off the bounce, I'd say off the catch and shoot, but doesn't get a whole lot of those from an opportunity perspective. They list him at 6'3", $190. If you told me he was 6'3" and a half, 175, I'd believe you too. He's not like skinny built or anything. He's just long and he uses the length well around the rim. He doesn't pull up in the mid range a whole lot. He's pretty smart about his shot selection. I think Milos gets the mark here in the matchup. Milos is 6'4". Milos is strong. Milos is also a point guard, right? I think that's kind of a natural matchup there. Don't be surprised to see Malik Wilson on him when he's in the game. Malik's a tenacious defender that's just a crazy athlete, can run guys ragged. Emmanuel Sharp, I think, could also get some physical minutes with them as well. He's a threat scorer anywhere. He doesn't have a ton of gears. He's not like a guy that has all the different things on a stick shift, right? But he does shift gears really well and kind of takes advantage of defenders falling asleep. So I think that's why you got to kind of throw a bunch of different guys at him. Again, he's really, really good. I think he could get his 18 and Houston still wins this game pretty handily. But he's a guy that, again, is getting nearly 20 points a game in college right now. Now, Sincere Harris, their other guard, is where the points are coming from to go to Javon Small, because Sincere Harris is more of a junkyard dog type. He's definitely going to cover LJ Cryer, and I think the inverse is going to be true too, where Cryer covers him. But he's, much more of a defensive guy, dive on the floor guy, screen guy, offensive rebound to set up a new possession kind of guy. Sincere Harris is listed at 6'4", $175. He might be 6'4", $175. Probably shouldn't take my own guess. That's what he listed at. He's not one I'm worried about scoring a whole lot, because again, Javon Small gets a lot of the shots, and starts the actions. Sincere Harris is kind of just there to kind of be their glue guy, their starting lineup glue guy. The guy that is there to shoot the ball is Jonathan Powell. 38% from three, over 6 attempts per game, 6'6", hard to get up there and contest his jump shot. When they run that pick and roll action with a spot up shooter set up for the kick out, he's the one spot for the kick out. He does shoot on the catch and moving catch pretty well. I don't mean to say he can't do that, but I feel like Houston takes something away, and making him uncomfortable is me a thing that they take away. Whoever's covering him knows that they have to just like stunt, or they have to hope for help side somewhere else to come over and cover Javon Small on the drive and stuff like that, because Jonathan Powell's going to be the kind of guy that can do a lot of damage, I should say, from the outside if you leave him open for too many shots. I don't think Houston will. I think Houston does. I don't think Houston does any of that with this guy. But if you were to tell me someone hit 4 or 5 threes, it'd be Jonathan Powell, right? Their power forward is interesting. Toby Akani, 6'8", listed at 210. He might be stronger than that. He might be bigger than that. He gets a few points per game on junky possession, offensive rebound, putback kind of stuff, but he's not a scorer. I think in the starting lineup for Houston, Jawan Roberts is the starting mark for him. Kind of a spot where, because he's not such a scoring threat, Toby Akani, you can have Jawan play more of the free safety back line, talking through where actions are coming from kind of guy, right? On the same coin, other side, I feel like both Javier and JoJo Tugler covering Toby Akani could be useful, because then you get all that length in a help position at the rim to help defend the rim when guys like Javon Small are attacking the cup, right? And so I could see any of the bigs covering him. Roberts is, I think, the savvy one I would start with, but then when Francis comes in, I'd probably let Francis cover him, because I want Francis at the rim with him to help protect the rim from other guys attacking it, which leads us to their big guy. And Eduardo Andre has only recently started starting games for them, and I think they're a lot better with him on the floor. He's every bit of 6'11". He might be a 7-footer. They list him 6'11". He might be bigger than that. He got the starting gig because of some injuries, and I don't think he's ever going to get back. Simply put, if he catches the ball inside of 5 foot, inside the 5 foot area, it's 2 points. He scores with physicality and aggression from inside of 5 feet. You make him catch outside of that, it could be a turnover. That's just as simple as it goes. Now, high motor, aggression, that physicality, he gave Hunter Dickinson a ton of problems when they played Kansas. A ton of problems, right? When they were in that high screen roll action with Javon Small, he's the one setting the screen, and with the hard dive, right? That's how they get him involved. And what's interesting is that hard dive is both to catch the pass when he catches an assist from Javon Small or whatever, and he also will catch the putback off of missed threes, off of missed floaters, or missed midway. Like he'll catch the put and get his put back in there. His points per game, that kind of stuff, is all kind of wonky because of that like recent increase in role. And so I don't know that you can rely on him to be a non-scorer the way his year-long per game stats would indicate. He's good. And I think that I start with Tugler on him because of his size. You want Tugler's length there. I think that if I have Francis and Jawan, though, I want Jawan there on him as opposed to Francis, because I want the movement out of Roberts. And then I mentioned that if Francis is on Toby Akani, then you're at the cup protecting the rim. Now, the real advantage here in the matchups, aside from a couple of spots I've already mentioned, though, is the bench. They don't have a Terrence Arsenault. They don't have Malik Wilson. They don't have a Javier Francis coming off their bench. All three of those guys functionally could start on a lot of Big 12 teams, right? That's going to continue to be Houston's advantage. We didn't even talk about like Mercy Miller and do they get him in the game or whatever, right? Those three guys, the 8-man rotation, where he gets rounded out there, is really, really important for what Houston's trying to do, right? Now, Joseph Yusufu and KJ Tenner are tough kids, kind of, bull in China shop kind of guards that come in for them. Both 6 foot tall. Yusufu is a little bit more built across, but neither is a big time scoring threat. Neither is going to come in and lock down Emmanuel Sharp. Neither of those guys are necessarily worried about as much. They certainly are not Terrence, Malik, Javier. I think that rotation and the freshness it allows Houston's defense is really going to be a big deal in this one. And I don't know if you're keeping track here as you go through, but I think Houston at least wins 3 starting matchups and the bench and pushes at the other 2 at the worst. Javon Small might win his matchup because he scores a lot of points. That's all good for Houston. And so that's, I think, why I feel so confident in this one after watching some video. But I do think, and this is where Big 12 basketball made just Big 12 basketball, this game might just get regular old-fashioned ugly. And when that happens, got to be ready to play a little bit ugly. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Now, if you've got those subscriptions and you don't know how many times you're paying what, Rocket Money is here to help you. Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you forgot about or that you might be paying twice. It definitely happened to me. Happens to everybody, but happened to me too. Had a few subscriptions that didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances on your phone. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower bills so you can grow your savings. It even brings everything together all in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users, has saved over 500 million in canceled subscriptions, and is saving members up to $740 a year using all of the app's premium features. And to me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I've canceled several services. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here, but I've canceled several services myself that I just wasn't using anymore. Already saved a bunch of money because of that. They have a goals feature as well. You can set up automatically set some money aside for the future. Again, I got little man, his future, my future. We're putting money aside. No more stressing about budgeting every month. The app does that for you. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. Rocketmoney.com/locked on. Park Ranger Locked on Cougs. You're talking Houston and West Virginia in a Big 12 battle on Wednesday night. Now, I think predictive measures think this is going to be a bloodbathy, physical kind of game. Both teams pride themselves on that. I've said to this point, I'm sticking to it. I don't think it's going to be. I think Houston's going to win this one by 15 or more. However, if we entertain the idea, then I'm wrong. Sure, I'm wrong a lot, and I'll own it after the fact if I am in the postgame show on Wednesday night / you might hear it Thursday morning if that's your MO. But both of these teams pride themselves on defense. And admittedly, they're going to pull out some sort of, if I've watched 3 games of these guys now at this point, usually, it's pretty quick watch on them because you go through without free throws over, but 3 games of these guys, they pride themselves on defense. And what I think is interesting, partially because of the lineups, but a larger part because of who they play, they kind of do different stuff on defense every game. And so what I interpret that as is that, David DeVry, we heard from on the crossover show on Tuesday. Mountaineer Paul pointed out that he's really kind of building his program in the same kind of vein as Houston based on the defense and whatever. I think what that means is that they're going to take some away from Houston that, they are going to they're going to face guard Emmanuel Sharp and not let him wiggle free, or they're going to force Andre Crowd to drive or whatever, right? Whatever they try to do, they're going to force something. And I will say they practice too, and they're a Division I basketball team. They were ranked until very recently. And ultimately, I guess that would be how they ugly the game is both teams are low scoring, right? I think that's their way, their path to that kind of a game. And if both teams are down around 55, 60, it's just a close game and it's a single game sample, and who knows how the end goes, right? I think that's what they're hoping for there. And there's gonna be a lot of floor burn kind of moments, a lot of charges taken, a lot of block shots, a lot of turnovers forced and whatever. I don't think Houston's gonna play into that. I think they got enough versatility on offense not to play their way into that kind of a game. But again, if I'm trying to think through how the Big 12 is. Teams in this conference are very good. Coaches in this conference are even better. I do think that there's some level of scouting that they're going to have down that's going to lead some of that. And so I think that even what's funny is, and I actually didn't write down talk about this now, but even in the wins, like their marquee wins, right? West Virginia goes up like 18 on Kansas, right? Ultimately wins by a single point because that like ugly style of play they're trying to do, they don't have the depth to keep it up for 40 minutes, right? It's exhausting. It's exhaustive, right? And you see Houston rotate through guys to kind of keep afloat with that, right? And so if for whatever reason, that backup guard, Joseph Yusufu, he comes in and hits a couple threes and keeps a minute, wins those minutes or whatever. It could get a little ugly, I guess. Most games they've had, if they had a big lead, it whittled itself down at some point. And I think the reason I think I'm so confident in this one is that Houston's playing at Fertitta. They've lost 6 total games since the stadium was built, right? And the Fertitta Center is not, it's not to say they can't lose. Again, they lost those 6 games, and one of them was like the Alabama game a couple years ago, that Temple the same year. The 2023 season, they lost more home games than road games, which is weird. That's just how few games they lost, I guess. But I look at that and say, well, I don't think they ever get to the big lead that they had against Kansas or against Arizona, and they played Arizona twice already, or Colorado. I don't think they ever get to that big lead in Fertitta Center. And then if you watch in those games how they wear thin and wear out, I think that still happens. And I guess theoretically, if Houston's missing shots, it's been a few days since the last game. And I'll end with, I think Sampson said in his media availability this week, and it's kind of been, the not so secret thing flying around, is Houston's had an illness go through the team. Sounds like people have been in and out of practice, in and out of whatever, sick. Cry had 104 fever the day after playing a game. Sampson said he had it. Those kind of things happen, right? If Houston's less than 100%, they'd probably never admit it until someone asked them or forced them to. But also, I could see how that could lead to that slower start, and then this game just ends up being kind of ugly throughout. Now, I'm predicting I'll be more generous. I'll go 72-58 Houston. That's up from my prediction, I think, with Mountaineer Paul. I think in that one I was still kind of on the ugly train, and I watched the Colorado and Arizona games since that conversation. I'd only seen the Kansas one before that. I think that this one ends up being more in Houston's favor than I might have realized. I've shifted some. Tell me in the comments down below if you have or have not, or find me on social media, Ainsworth 512, wherever you're on social media, talk about Houston Cougar, basketball, football, transport, all those kinds of things each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. Now, during the game, I'll be live tweeting as always, talking about my thoughts around it. I'll be live for the post game. That may also serve as Thursday's show unless something crazy happens elsewhere in Houston Cougar sports. Hit subscribe so you get the latest. Hit the bell so you know we're live on YouTube. That way you can be ready for the post game with us afterwards. Locked On Cougs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every single day. Go Cougs.